Why Australia is constructing 8 top-secret military projects in 5 places. Australia is spending over $300 billion in the next decade on something most Australians don't even know exists. And it's happening in 8 locations right now. Some so remote, they don't appear on regular maps. If you live in Perth, Darwin, or Adelaide, this will change your city forever. But wait, before we begin, please subscribe to ensure that you never miss out on any of my essential stuff. Comment, I subscribe below, and I will personally welcome you to our community. With that said, let's get started. Commander Sarah Mitchell had been in the Navy for 15 years when she received her classified orders in July 2024. Routine briefing, she thought, until they showed her the satellite images. The Cocos Islands, a tiny coral atoll 2,000 miles from the mainland. Population, 600. But that wasn't what caught her attention. I thought it was a mistake, she told me later, choosing her words carefully. Then I saw the runway expansion. These weren't runways for cargo planes. They were built to handle aircraft that could reach mainland China. The United States is spending over $300 million on Northern Australia bases alone, making it the top overseas location for U.S. Air Force and Navy construction spending, but that's just location number 8 on our list. Let me show you where the real money is going. If you ever wondered why your tax dollars jumped this year, here's your answer. Australia allocated a record $36.8 billion to defense in 2024-25. That is a 6.3% increase from last year. Your neighbor might be building one of these projects right now, and they can't even tell you about it. I'm counting down from 8 to 1, least the most shocking. By number 3, you'll understand why China is watching every single move. By number 1, well, you might not sleep tonight. $662 million. Started this year. Most Australians have never heard of it. It sits on Australia's northwestern coast, facing the Indian Ocean, closer to Asia than it is to Sydney. The redevelopment includes runway upgrades, new hangars, and what the Department of Defense carefully calls enhanced operational capabilities. Translation is a forward operating base, the kind you build when you expect to need it. But here's what they won't tell you on the evening news. This isn't just about Australia anymore. Picture this. A coral atoll so small its entire population is 600 people, surrounded by turquoise water that looks like a screensaver. Paradise, right? Wrong. The Australian Defence Force is upgrading the airfield to accommodate P-8A Poseidon aircraft, submarine hunters that can patrol for 12 hours straight. But here's the part that should make you pay attention. The Cocos Islands sit closer to the Strait of Malacca than the U.S. Navy base at Diego Garcia, and half of China's oil shipments pass through that strait. A place most Australians can't find on a map is now a frontline base. That's when I discovered location number 6. And this is where the money gets serious. Let me put this in perspective. What Australia is doing right now isn't just big. It's bigger than the Snowy Hydro scheme. It rivals the establishment of Australia's entire automotive industry. 21 major defense projects. Combined approved budget, $81 billion. If you're thinking, is this even necessary? Hold that thought. Location number 5 will answer it. This one's not a single base. It's nationwide. $3.28 billion spread across the Northern Territory, Western Australia, Queensland, and New South Wales. Target completion, 2026. Runway upgrades, aircraft hangars, advanced air traffic control systems. The kind of infrastructure that sounds boring until you meet David Chun. David's a civil engineer from Brisbane. He was hired in early 2023, signed a non-disclosure agreement, and couldn't tell his wife what he was actually building. For 8 months, he came home from work and said, "Just runway stuff, honey, standard maintenance." Then one day, he watched a U.S. military transport unload equipment onto the runway he'd just upgraded. That's when I understood. He told me over coffee, still choosing his words carefully. We're not just expanding runways. We're hardening them for bombers. But those runways, they're just a delivery system for what's being manufactured at location number 5. Here's where it gets real. $21 billion over the next decade for what Australia calls a guided weapons and explosive ordnance enterprise. That's not a renovation. That's building an entire domestic weapons industry from scratch. Starting in 2025, Australia will manufacture GMLRS missiles, the kind that can hit targets over 70 kilometers away, and 155mm M795 artillery ammunition. Lockheed Martin Australia was selected to produce GMLRS at scale. Thales got the contract for ammunition forging. Now here's what most media won't tell you, because it doesn't fit neatly into a headline. This isn't about offense. It's about supply chains. Australia learned a harsh lesson during the pandemic. When supply chains break, you're vulnerable. Now imagine that during a conflict. Suddenly, manufacturing your own missiles isn't warmongering, it's survival. But you might be thinking this escalates conflict or prevents it. I'll let you decide, because location number 4 is where America enters the picture. And not quietly. Before we get there, let me read you something that was declassified earlier this year. The 2024 National Defense Strategy states, there is no longer a 10-year window of strategic warning time for conflict. Read that again. No, longer. A 10-year window. Translation. If war starts with China, Australia doesn't have years to prepare. It has months, maybe weeks. Suddenly, these projects make sense. Or do they? If you've ever felt like something big was coming but couldn't name it, you were right. And it's been coming for longer than you think. Geography lesson. Tindal sits less than 2,000 miles from the South China Sea. That makes it closer to the Philippines and Australia's own East Coast capital, Canberra. Australia is spending $1.5 billion on Tindal's redevelopment. New fuel depots, reinforced hangars, expanded runways. But here's the kicker. The United States plans to build its own parking apron here, big enough for 6 B-52 bombers. And those bombers can reach mainland China. Wing Commander Fiona Pierce, who oversees Tindal operations, put it carefully, this location is vitally important, with greater reach into our near region. Near region is military speak for South China Sea. Think about that. Australian soil, American bombers, Chinese targets within range. But Tindal is just the northern piece of a much bigger puzzle. Location number 3 is happening in a city you've actually heard of, and it might be your backyard. Darwin isn't a secret. The U.S. Marine rotational force spends 6 months of every year here. But what most Australians don't know is what's being built underneath their feet. Fuel depots, munitions bunkers, command facilities. A senior U.S. official told reporters, and this is a direct quote, Darwin is absolutely key terrain for us to help bring stability to the region. We are more focused on that interoperability with the Australian Defence Force. How can we project power from Northern Australia into the region? Project Power. That's the phrase that matters. Darwin sits closer to the Philippines than Canberra does. When American officials talk about projecting power, they mean Darwin is the launchpad. Here's where Australians are genuinely divided. Some see this as essential deterrence. Others, they point out that this doesn't deter China. It guarantees Australia will be involved if conflict breaks out. Sam Raghaveen, a former Australian intelligence analyst, said it bluntly. It makes those bases a target. There's no easy answer here. Just trade-offs. Safety versus risk. Alliance versus autonomy. And if Darwin made you uncomfortable, the top 2 locations will keep you up tonight. Everything so far, the bases, the weapons, the runways, they're all supporting what comes next. Because we haven't even talked about the submarines yet. In September 2021, Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States announced AUKUS, a trilateral security partnership aimed at promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific that is secure and stable. That's the diplomatic language. Here's the real language. Australia will operate a fleet of 8 nuclear-powered submarines by the mid-2050s. The first Virginia-class submarine, purchased from the United States, arrives in the early 2030s. The first Australian-built SS AUKUS submarine will be delivered in the early 2040s. Now here's the number that should make you stop scrolling. The estimated cost over the life of the program, $200 to $250 billion. Maybe more. That's more than double the canceled French submarine deal that made headlines back in 2021. If you just gasped at that number, you're not alone. But that brings us to location number 2, where all that money is actually going. 12 billion Australian dollars. That's just under 8 billion US dollars in initial investment. But this is just the beginning. Henderson will become Australia's naval shipbuilding and sustainment facility. It'll serve as a maintenance hub and provide contingency docking for nuclear submarines. Over 30 years, 55 new vessels will be built here, including both conventional and nuclear-powered submarines. The scale is almost impossible to comprehend. By 2030, this single facility will generate 8,500 jobs in shipbuilding and sustainment. Over the next 3 decades, 20,000 additional jobs. I met Emma Rodriguez last month. She's 19, a welding apprentice in Perth. She grew up surfing, had no interest in defense or politics. But when she heard about the Henderson project, something clicked. They told us we're building the future of Australian defense, she said, eyes lit up. I still can't believe Perth is ground zero for this. Here's what makes Henderson truly strategic. It won't just serve Australian submarines. It'll provide maintenance for U.S. Navy and Royal Navy submarines, too. 3 nations, 1 facility. Nuclear submarines rotating through Perth. But Henderson is massive. Location number 1, though, it changes everything about what a submarine even means. 20 miles south of Perth. Population for 1 million people. Families, beaches, coffee shops, normal life. And starting in 2027, nuclear submarines. $5.2 billion in upgrades. Main construction began in August of last year. From as early as 2027, that's 2 years from now, HMAS Sterling will host up to 5 nuclear-powered submarines on rotation, 1 from the UK, up to 4 from the United States. Let that sink in. Imagine your city, your suburbs, and nuclear submarines 20 miles south. Here's what makes nuclear submarines different from conventional ones. Their range is limited only by crew endurance. Theoretically, they can operate anywhere across the globe without refueling. From Western Australia, a nuclear submarine can access critical choke points through the Indonesian Straits and patrol the Indian Ocean's sea lanes, the arteries of global trade. That positioning? It's everything. Now here's where it gets politically complicated. The Australian Submarine Agency was very careful to state, this is not a U.S. Navy base. Australia maintains a long-standing policy of not hosting foreign bases. But, and this is crucial, activities under Submarine Rotational Force West are consistent with this policy. Read between the lines. It's not a base, but American and British submarines will be stationed there, rotating through, using Australian facilities. Here's what nobody's talking about in all the headlines about deterrence and capability. Nuclear waste. The first reactor from these submarines won't need disposal until the 2050s. But planning starts now. Within the next 12 months, Australia will identify potential locations for storage and disposal of nuclear waste, likely on current or future defense property. Where? They haven't said yet. But if you live near a defense facility, well, you might want to pay attention to your local council meetings. So what does all this really mean? 8 locations, $330 billion, thousands of jobs, 3 allied nations, and one massive question. Is this deterrence or escalation? Here's the reality. Real defense growth doesn't even begin until 2027, when the budget reaches $44.95 billion. By 2033, Australia aims to spend $66.7 billion annually on defense. But there's a problem. The Australian Defence Force currently has only 58,600 uniformed personnel. That's a shortfall of more than 5,000 people. They're building the bases faster than they can recruit the people to operate them. I asked Commander Mitchell what she thought about all this. She looked out toward the ocean for a long moment. People ask me if I'm scared, she said. I tell them I'm more scared of doing nothing. But not everyone agrees. Sam Raghaveen, that former intelligence analyst I mentioned earlier, put it differently. This conflates America's strategic objectives in Asia with ours, and it makes those bases a target. Two smart people. Two completely different conclusions. So here's what I need you to answer in the comments, because I genuinely want to know what you think. Would you live next to a nuclear submarine base if it meant stopping a war? Or does building all this infrastructure actually make war more likely? If you're in Perth, Darwin, or Adelaide, this is happening in your city right now. This isn't theoretical. Construction crews are on site. Money is being spent. Your tax dollars are funding this. Drop a blue circle emoji if you think this protects Australia. Drop a red circle if you think it makes us a target. And if you want to see what China is building in response to all of this, that's a video I'm working on right now. But first, I need to know, are you ready for what's coming?